Hi, it's DrC. We're going to look at the Atheist Experience from the 25th of July 2021. Just before we jump into it, a couple of quick comments. One, thank you to the ACA for allowing me to do this. It's really kind of them. Two, we are effectively here for the science. So as the callers call in and maybe the hosts respond, that kind of thing, if there's a link to any interesting pieces of science, then I will feel free to pause and to maybe throw a bit more light onto the subject, enlighten, give a bit more detail, that kind of thing, to help people to appreciate the discussion that's being had. And three, critical thinking. And really, I'm looking for comments where the scientific method might be useful to jump in with. If callers' contents don't really link to any of that stuff, then I will feel free to sort of move on. And if anybody thinks, okay, that was pretty interesting, I wanted to hear more about that, then look in the comments at the bottom and I will place a link for the show. Finally, if you enjoy this and you think it kind of, adds to the experience from the program, then please consider the big four: like, share, subscribe, and click the bell. If you click the bell with the sounders, that means that you will get notifications, or you should get notifications of other things that I post. It isn't all about the Atheist Experience. I post stuff about various things, some of which you may like, some of which you may not like. Entirely up to you. We're all different. Anyway, without further ado, let's get on with the show.
I'm your host, Matt Tony. Join me this week, my very good friend, Seth Andrews. How are you, sir?
Good to see you, my friend. I'm well, hanging in there.
Awesome. I had there were like two of your voices.
I got to pause straight away and need to tell you, these two I absolutely love. Matt, I think, does a lot of good work. And Seth has just got the most heavenly voice. And if you don't know Seth, you've never come across him, then he basically created the Thinking Atheist. His story is absolutely amazing. Like a lot of people that were once theists and now are atheists, they all seem to have really interesting stories which are worth looking into. But I absolutely adore Seth. I think he's just got a dreamy voice, very, very sort of dry sense of humor. I really like these two. This is kind of like, this is sort of, for me, this is sort of the dream team. So anyway, let's carry on.
Voices for half a second there, which is always fun because I got the little reverb thing there. We're going to jump into callers shortly. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Seth, the mods will have all the information to post in chat, and it should appear down in the sub thing for the show. But Seth is the originator and founder and host of the Thinking Atheist, and just didn't you just do another voiceover for another book the other day?
Yeah, actually, Dr. Joshua Bowen is an Assyriologist, which is something I would draw up at parties all the time if I had that title. Yeah, I'm an Assyriologist. But he's an expert in the ancient Near East and in Old Testament Hebrew. So he writes this book called The Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament.
I'll carry on with this in a second. An Assyriologist is like an amazing sort of title that you could give yourself. Another one that I've often thought, if you're sort of into perfumes, an aromancer. Oh, God, great names.
So we did Old Testament Hebrew. So he writes this book called The Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament. So we did a broadcast about it. I had him on the show and we were talking. And on a whim, I buzzed him, a few days later. I said, hey, Josh, do you have an audiobook version? And if not, would you like one? And do you need a narrator? So we started to have a conversation. And next thing I knew, I was up to my eyeballs in narrating an 11.5-hour audiobook of The Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament. And it was an education for me because you learn how to announce 5,000 Hebrew words or, Assyrian words. It was easily the most challenging audio project I've ever narrated, but it's also one I'm very proud of. So anyway, it just released a few weeks ago. So we've been kind of watching to see everybody respond to it. It's been pretty cool. Forgive the long answer, but yes, I just narrated an audiobook. Thanks for
It's a perfect long answer. And that's because I had Josh on the Hang Up right after he released that book. And Josh and I had actually done a team debate on slavery and a bunch of other stuff. So I was really glad to get that. There is, though, Today we have a birthday as part of our team here, so please watch this special message. So
how much fun was that?
That was so awesome.
Yeah, that's big fun. Happy birthday for
Happy
me. Happy
56th birthday to Katie. That's what it said on the cake. Is that wrong? Oh, we got double thank yous. Happy 30th wonderful birthday, and many, many more happy 30th birthdays for you coming up. May you never age. But all of us would be a little bit lost if it weren't for Katie. So we love you dearly, and me especially, because Katie frequently helps me out with stuff, including non-ACA stuff. So I couldn't be happier to be here to help celebrate Katie's birthday. But we have callers to get to, and I know you're not going to believe this, Seth, but we have callers who claim that they can prove God exists.
Imagine that. I look forward to the epiphanies that are to follow.
I am stunned. We're going to start here with our very first caller, which may actually be the end of the atheist experience. Pratyush in Tokyo says he can prove that God exists. So welcome, Pratyush. You're on with Seth and Matt.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So which God are you going to prove exists?
Satan.
Sorry?
Satan.
Satan.
You're going to prove Satan exists. Is Satan actually a god?
Yes, but Satan was a fallen angel. I mean, he's worshipped sometimes as a deity, but is he a god? That's a good question.
Yes, all I know about Satan is that he is evil, and he is the most feared of mythological character.
Mythological.
So and he's very evil and scary.
So here's the thing, Pratyush.
No, I heard it too. Too. Mythological.
Yeah. I'm going to call absolute bullshit on this call, and I'm going to hang up on you for lying to the call screeners and laying in wait, because it says here that you can prove God exists, that you were Hindu, that God created a finite timeline, and now you just told me you're going to prove Satan exists, but the only thing you know about Satan is these mythological. So you, sir, are full of shit.
No.
Goodbye. You're done.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So,
we've been talking. He did sort of throw a thought into my head, though. We've been talking recently about the satanic panic. You know, I had the honor of being interviewed for a Blumhouse documentary called Fall River about the Fall River murders of 1979 and 1980. And of course, this was right on the cusp of the satanic panic of the 80s and 90s. And you and I came out of that sort of wild moral panic where everybody was playing albums backwards, and, you know, they saw the devil and D&D, dice, and et cetera. We were talking about how, you know, the fear of Satan and the panic about the devil really hasn't gone anywhere. And for a lot of people, it's actually become even more pronounced. They really do feel like every generation has felt like we were in the end times. And it always kind of freaked me out, because I think to myself, if you are a devout believer and you think that the end times are a precursor to the return of Jesus Christ and his reign and your eternity in heaven, I would think that the end of the world would be something you'd be overjoyed about. So the idea that everybody's losing their mind and fearful and panicked, to me, always seems a little bit hypocritical, right? I mean, if you really think that, oh yeah, when Satan goes crazy and the world ends, it's going to be a precursor to the greatest joy I've ever experienced. I've never understood that contradiction. That's just the one thought that came into my head. So sorry for the digression.
Yeah, no worries. So since we finished the first call, I'm going to go ahead and do the regular announcements. That was the fastest call right off the bat. If you're going to try and prank call the show, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's happened many times over the years, and generally, as long as it's a decent call that's going to talk, I can't read people's mind to tell whether or not they actually believe this. But if you're going to be that obvious, yeah, you're not going to get much further than an introduction. We have lots of options with people trying to demonstrate a God exists. We have John in Texas who wants to know how the universe got here. Hey, John, how are you?
Good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. You're on with me and Seth. So what have you got for us?
Oh, you said Seth?
Yeah, Seth Andrews.
Okay, I don't think I know him, but I just want to make sure I got his name correct. Yeah,
Nice.
I went to your site, and you have "What do you believe?" ? And why. And so the question comes up of, how do we even get the start of all this, and why do you believe it didn't have a supernatural creation?
Okay, just before they move on, first of all, how did it all start? That could mean how did the universe start, or it could mean how did life start, or maybe both. The point that I'm making here is that sometimes when you hear someone make a comment or ask a question, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you understand exactly what they're getting at. What is the point? Which normally means, as boring as it sounds, a bunch of definitions. So we need to know what he means by the start. If he means the start of the universe, and we assume that sort of like the universe is everything, then he's basically asking about what scientists would now refer to as the Big Bang. And the point is, we don't understand the moment of the creation of the universe at the Big Bang. Physics does not work at that point. This is understood. It is a time at time t equals 0, at 0 time, because time began when the universe began, which means that it's difficult to really discuss the idea of what happened before the Big Bang, since you can't talk about a before if time hasn't begun. And so there is nobody that will say that they know what happened at the Big Bang. There are speculations, but the problem is with speculations, they're ideas we can talk about which try not to break the present rules, but we know that the present rules of the universe, the things that we would call the laws of physics, we know that those don't work at the Big Bang, at the moment of creation. For example, one of the laws of our universe seems to be that you cannot create or destroy energy, only convert it from one form to another. There's a couple of provisos in that which nobody talks about, but we'll ignore those small points, which I'm not saying are not important. But at the Big Bang itself, clearly there was nothing, and then there was something. So that breaks that rule straight away. So the laws only work back to a certain point in time, a very small point close to the Big Bang, but nonetheless not at the Big Bang itself. So I will move on and maybe jump in with a bit more detail when I see actually where he's going with this.
It didn't have a supernatural creation.
Okay, I'm going to stop there because I've forgotten that. Okay, supernatural, because that comes up a lot, the idea of supernatural. First of all, supernatural, however you want to define it, in my view, and I think in a lot of views, supernatural means something happened that did not agree with the laws of the universe, did not agree with the rules of physics. There was a suspension or a breaking of those rules so that something could happen. That is supernatural. To our knowledge, we have never, ever discovered anything that breaks those rules. Fact. So we've never identified anything that we can say is supernatural. Not a single one. Now, you could say, well, we do know about things that are supernatural because, for example, the concept of Jesus dying, hanging around a bit as a dead body, and then coming back to life, that breaks the rules because we know that can't happen. All of the evidence from centuries or thousands of years of knowledge of kind of like what happens when you die, that doesn't happen. So that would have been a supernatural event. However, we have no evidence that that actually happened. We just have stories. And we're not going to get into that at this stage because the concept of things like a book providing evidence is just generally considered to be not worthy, at least scientifically not worthy. So we have no evidence that supernatural events have ever occurred. And here's a weird one. If we discovered something that was breaking the rules of the universe, so it was supernatural, and we investigated it, and it was reproducible, it wasn't a one-off, so actually it becomes hearsay, or it becomes, this is what I saw with my senses, but I have no actual evidence so that it can be repeated, and there it is again. If we could identify something that was supernatural, and it was reproducible, and we could study it, it would then become not supernatural, because the evidence would be there, and we would then try to feed that evidence into our existing structure of science and the way that the universe works. And we would have to try and identify what's going on. And it might force us then to review, which is actually a really, really good thing, and scientists will do this a lot, review what we know and what we think, and incorporate the new evidence, and then it becomes not supernatural. So the concept of supernatural is a weird one. And I think that the argument I'm basically saying is, if you feel that supernatural means the rules of the universe were suspended so that something could happen and then they kick back in gear again, that's never happened to our knowledge. We have no evidence that that's ever happened, and basically we are led to believe, therefore, that it is highly likely that that ever happens. Let's move on.
Why do you believe it didn't have a supernatural creation?
So I don't believe that it had a supernatural, or I don't know whether or not it had a supernatural creation. I have no reason to believe that anything supernatural exists because I haven't seen any evidence for the supernatural, and I have no way of confirming. Like, if somebody says, hey, this just happened and the cause is supernatural, I want to know how they determine that the cause is supernatural. And so far, there's never been any demonstration of any way to detect that something supernatural has occurred. All we have are people saying something happened and I'm going to claim that it's supernatural. When we go back to something like the origin of the universe, we don't know how the universe originated. We just know that it did. And it is a mistake to conclude that because we don't know, that we somehow should be able to say it's supernatural. So the burden of proof is on the people who are claiming they know how the universe started. And the people who want to claim a supernatural origin don't seem to have any way to meet that burden of proof. And the people who claim that it has some sort of natural scientific explanation haven't sorted it out because, there's a limit to what we can investigate right now.
So we have a conservation of energy that says, energy can change forms, but it can't be created or destroyed. It can't happen naturally.
So, John?
How that is not proof.
Okay, just before we hear more of what John's about to say, I would like to just make a comment about the law of conservation of energy. There are a bunch of quantities in physics which are special quantities. I like to call them almost like they're sort of like gold standards when it comes to quantities. They are the conserved quantities. And there are a whole bunch of conserved quantities, and they are really important. For example, total energy is conserved, which is the one that John is referring to here. Linear momentum is conserved. Most of the time, just as a small aside here, most of the time people think that of all the conserved quantities, well, surely total energy is the most important one because it's like the big one. Forces and energy in physics are the two main ideas that we talk about, and that's the conservation law for energy. So that's the big one. Actually, there is an argument, in my view, that conservation of linear momentum is the most important one, but I suppose the reality is they're all important. Angular momentum, charge. Then there's a few weird ones, and really I'm discussing physics the way that it's taught up to, but not including a degree. You also need to know that there are two quantities called baryon number and lepton number that are also conserved quantities. Now, what I would like is just to consider the idea of how do we specify a conserved quantity? What's the statement that works for it? For energy, we often say what John has just said. You cannot create or destroy energy, only convert it from one form to another. I actually don't like that way of describing the law of conservation of energy. And the reason I don't like it is because it doesn't work. That sentence doesn't work for any of the other conserved quantities. For example, let's pick charge. You cannot create or destroy charge, only convert it from one form to another. Okay, well, that's not true. I cannot convert positive charge into negative charge. There are two types of charge for sure. That's not possible. But I can create charge. It is not true to say you cannot create or destroy charge. I can destroy charge, as in there was some charge there, there is now no charge anywhere. That can happen. It happens all the time. And you can create charge from no charge. The processes to look into, one is called pair production and one is called annihilation. Just take something nice and simple like an electron and a positron and look that up. If it comes up and it becomes relevant, we can discuss it in more detail depending on where John goes with his comments. So I don't like this sentence, you cannot create or destroy, only convert from one form to another. I want a sentence where I can see the words total energy and I can remove it and I can replace it with charge or linear momentum or angular momentum or lepton number or baryon number. That's what I want. And the sentence is this. For an isolated system, the total energy is a constant. Now I can remove the words total energy there and I can shove in total linear momentum or just linear momentum or angular. So I can write for charge, for example, for an isolated system, the charge is a constant. And when we take pair production and we take annihilation, if I take an electron and a positron and I let them combine together, because they will be attracted to each other because one is negative and one is positive, before the event is when they come together, before the event, the total charge is zero because I've got an electron that's negative, I've got a positron that's positive, they have equal size charge. So the total charge is zero. And when they annihilate, they turn into electromagnetic radiation, which is not charged. So there is no charge there either. So this works. This sentence works. I don't like the sentence that John has just given. I'm not going to use that as a criticism, though, of his kind of introduction of science into his discussion here, because it is probably the most common way of stating the law of conservation of energy, that you cannot create or destroy, only convert. It's just not the most ideal. It's not the most elegant way of saying it, basically because it doesn't have this generality of being useful for all of the conserved quantities. So let's carry on. Let's get back to John.
Or destroyed. It can't happen naturally.
So, John,
how that is not proof enough for you on that.
No, sir.
I mean,
No, sir.
You said
I can answer this really easily,
throwing
John.
that out there.
John, I can answer this for you really easy.
I'm here.
The laws of thermodynamics apply within the universe. They do not apply outside of the universe. We have no idea whether or not those things apply prior to the origin of the universe. You can't take a law that applies within the universe, that is based on the physics within the universe, and say that it also applies outside the universe.
Okay, I think what John is saying here is that the law of conservation of energy did not work for the creation of the universe. Therefore, something else, therefore God. But as I said in the beginning of one of my previous comments here, the law we know that the laws of the universe, the laws of physics, they only work back to a certain point. They do not work for the Big Bang itself. And I think John is trying to basically say, well, if they did, something's wrong. You've got nothing, and then you've got all this energy. So if conservation of energy is correct, then when you say you've got nothing there, you've got like nothing plus God, and that has energy, and then God put some of that energy into the universe to create it. So afterwards, you've then got God plus the universe as well, but the universe has got some of God's energy, as it were. So I think he's trying to invoke the laws of physics for the moment of creation, and that's not applicable, as Matt says. Okay.
That is based on the physics within the universe, and say that it also applies outside the universe. And the incontrovertible proof of this is that would mean that whatever God you have believed in is also subject to those laws. And I don't think you believe that.
Well, first of all, you're not getting around that. This is what we know for sure, and you're ignoring it.
Okay, so John doesn't know what he's talking about now. When he says this is what we know for sure, I've already explained, we do not know this. This is rubbish. John is making this up. The laws of physics do not work at the Big Bang. We know this. No physicist has ever said they do. We understand the limitations of our knowledge. This is really important in science. The idea that you look at something and you say, I don't know, because I don't have the answer to that yet, that's acceptable, and that is fine, and that is part of the scientific process, the scientific method. John actually doesn't know what he's talking about. So now he's talking about things that he has no knowledge of, or at least not enough knowledge of, and he's going to look foolish. So it's a good example, in my view, and if any of you have watched my videos before, you'll have heard me comment on this. Sometimes a little bit of knowledge is not always a good thing, because a little bit of knowledge gained from, let's say, listening to a podcast or reading a scientific book, and I don't mean a scientific journal, I mean a popular book written for the public by let's say, a physicist. Like you pick up one of the books from Lawrence Krauss and you read that. So now you feel that you are imbued with knowledge and you can go out and talk to the world as a physicist. This is not the way it works. When we write books for the general public, they need to be popular or they won't sell. That's just a fact. And the publisher then will probably never work with you again on such a book. So we need to make sure that we put it at a level that people can follow and understand, and maybe make them feel that they do understand this. But the reality is, to be an expert in really any area that I can think of, you need to be studying it for decades and not just letting it waft over you. You got to dig in and start trying to understand this stuff. And I've been doing it now for, 40 odd years, a little bit more than 40 years. And I'm still learning. And so, yeah, John doesn't know what he's talking about, I'm afraid. And he needs to just go back, check his information and revise, because what he's saying now is complete rubbish.
That this is what we know for sure, and you're ignoring it. And
John?
You're saying,
John?
Wait, let me finish. Let me.
No, sir. No, sir. If you're going to
Go
misrepresent me, if I'm going to interrupt, I just explained to you that the laws of thermodynamics apply within the universe. They do not apply prior to the origin of the universe. Do you understand that?
Well, show me how they don't apply prior to the universe and how the universe got
No.
there, as you're ignoring the law.
You have to, so you need to be able to demonstrate that prior to the origin of the universe, those laws apply, because we only know they apply within the universe. We don't know what applied beforehand. And the thing I just demonstrated to you is, do you think your God is subject to the laws of thermodynamics?
No, because that would be impossible. And I'll tell you why.
John?
Supernatural.
John, you're not listening.
I won't get a chance to talk.
Correct. You're not going to get a chance to talk, John. John, you're not going to get a chance to talk because you're not listening. Do the laws of thermodynamics apply to your God?
No.
Why not?
Because it shows, from what we know for sure, that
John.
it had to happen supernaturally.
No,
supernatural creator.
No, sir. John, you are not listening at all.
Finish.
John, of course I'm not going to let you finish, John, because you're not listening. You're not answering the question. The question was, why don't your laws?
John's getting irate, but he's being an idiot here, and I think he's getting irate with Matt because Matt keeps interrupting him. But and a lot of people actually do get annoyed with Matt for interrupting people like this. But the point is, if you say something and what you're saying is incorrect, then someone needs to stop you, saying, hang on, that's not right. We need to stop there and maybe just revise what you're saying so that we can move forward with what you're saying in a way where we all agree on what's being said. If there is an error in what you're saying, it needs to be pointed out. Now, here's the point. Matt pointed out the error there. John's denying it, but that's not dealing with it. He's just saying, oh, I'm not going to listen to you. Effectively, that's what he's saying. I need to say what I want to say. And that's not the point of this, because that's not the way that a conversation happens. The point about a discussion or a conversation is not that I'm not going to listen to you. I'm just going to read this stuff that I've got written down here and nah, don't want to hear it. That is not the way it works. So John's getting irate, but he's getting irate because Matt is trying to put him on the spot and say, wait, why does this happen? Why does that not happen? You're effectively, what John is doing is trying, as I said earlier, to invoke the laws of thermodynamics, which he undoubtedly, John will not really know about the laws of thermodynamics. He may be an engineer, but he's certainly not speaking like an engineer, and he's definitely not speaking like a physicist, or he would know he's talking rubbish. And he needs to stop. He needs to review what he's saying, and he needs to listen and respond, and then the conversation can move forward. So I think Johnny's getting irate, and there's no need for it. It's unfortunately because he doesn't want to listen or can't afford to listen to the objection that Matt has raised, and Matt's objection is absolutely correct.
Listening at all.
Finish.
John, of course I'm not going to let you finish, John, because you're not listening. You're not answering the question. The question was, why don't your laws? I'm going to put you. You are on hold now, John. Listen to me and shut the fuck up. When you say the laws of thermodynamics don't apply to your God, and when I ask you why, you said something about because we know absolutely this. That's not why. Either the laws of thermodynamics apply to your God or not. You say they don't. I would agree with you that they don't apply outside of the universe. We'd have to have a demonstration of where they apply. So you don't think the laws apply to your universe, but to your God, but you think they apply prior to and outside of the universe, which is where you think your God is. That's what I'm trying to get to.
What I'm saying is they do not apply to, he's a supernatural, there's a supernatural creator.
You don't know that. You don't know that. How do you demonstrate that?
So then tell me what we don't know about the first law of thermodynamics.
The laws of thermodynamics are irrelevant, John. The laws of thermodynamics are irrelevant until you show that they work outside of the universe.
They don't work outside of the universe. This is the universe we have.
Which means that you don't get to,
they don't work
John, please listen. I know this is difficult for you, but please listen. You just said those laws don't apply outside of the universe. at the origin of the universe, you cannot then say that the laws of thermodynamics tell us how the universe originated, because they don't apply outside of the universe. And whatever origin of the universe was is necessarily outside of the universe, correct?
God is outside of the universe, correct?
We don't know. I don't know that there's a God at all, but whatever the origin of the universe is, it is not within the universe, correct?
Say that again.
Whatever the origin of the universe is, it is not within the universe, correct?
Not within.
Now, I think that John either doesn't understand that sentence, which is a relatively simple sentence. It could have maybe been expressed slightly differently, but if something creates something, then by definition, then that thing will not be part of what it created. There's various ways that you could say it, and John is going to struggle through this bit. But I think the problem that John's got now is Matt effectively has put him quite nicely into a corner, and I do not believe he will back down and come out and just accept the fact that what he's been saying is wrong. I think he'll try to come out and come out kind of fighting with his position of, well, I'm not going to listen to you. This is what I think, and you're just being stupid by not understanding, and that's going to potentially inflate and inflame the problems.
Not within. We know within the universe. We are in this universe.
John.
Is it just me? He actually sounds like Peter Griffin, or is it not me?
We know within the universe. We are in this universe,
John.
Matt. We are in this universe.
John, shut up and listen for a second. You are not listening. The origin of the universe, whatever caused the universe, is it within the universe or is it outside the universe?
It's outside the universe.
Yes. Why didn't you just say that when I asked you a minute ago? And you also acknowledged that the laws of thermodynamics don't apply outside the universe. So you cannot then use the laws of thermodynamics to tell me how the universe started.
Sure I can. I just told you.
No, sir, you cannot. Okay, John, you just said the laws of thermodynamics do not apply outside the universe. And now you're trying to say that because of the laws of thermodynamics, you can explain how the universe began. That is an absolute non sequitur. That is a logical fallacy. You cannot use, you want to say that it must be God and that the laws don't apply to God and that God is outside the universe. And all I'm saying is, A, we don't know whether or not there's a God. B, we have no idea what caused the universe. And C, whatever caused the universe isn't within the universe, and if you say that the laws don't apply outside the universe, then you cannot point to the laws. It's like saying, here are the rules of chess. Do the rules of chess in any way tell you what the origin of chess is?
That's not even, you talk about a non sequitur.
I'm sorry, sir. I'll let Seth try to explain this to you because I'm sitting here explaining things.
Thing, Matt. You just keep on going on with I don't understand and I can't explain anything.
You don't understand. What is it you would like to explain? Because if you're going to argue, John, if you're going to argue with fallacies, why would I let you continue?
So the first law of thermodynamics is a fallacy.
No, sir. No, sir, John.
I'm really sorry, John. You're being really stupid now.
The first law of thermodynamics is not a fallacy. You arguing that the first law of thermodynamics helps explain the origin of the universe is a fallacy. I'm sorry you don't know what a fallacy is, but there you go.
I would probably put a small amount of money on the fact that actually John doesn't know what the first law of thermodynamics is. The first law of thermodynamics is not a statement. It is a statement of conservation of energy, but it isn't a statement. The first law of thermodynamics is you cannot create or destroy energy, only convert it from one form to another. That is not the first law of thermodynamics. The first law of thermodynamics is far more focused than that.
It is a fallacy that it doesn't tell us anything about the origin of the universe is what you're saying.
I'm saying if you use the first law of thermodynamics or any law of thermodynamics, To construct an argument for the origin of the universe, you are making a fallacious argument because by your own admission, and I would agree, the laws of thermodynamics do not apply outside the universe. And whatever the origin of the universe is, as you've noted, must be outside the universe, which means the laws of thermodynamics don't apply to it.
Come on, John, work it out.
So what are you proving wrong with what I'm saying, that it had to be supernaturally? Tell me what I'm saying that it's wrong, that it had to be supernatural, and the supernatural creator is bound by the natural law that were created.
John?
Yes,
you cannot say, John, are you going to listen or not? John, are you listening or not?
Matt, are you listening or not? I could throw this at you. You come back with, we just don't know. We just don't know. We're going to forget about everything we know for what we don't know.
We're not forgetting about what we know. We're just admitting that there are some things we don't know, and you don't know how the universe originated.
Yes, I do. I know.
How then demonstrate how you know how the universe originated, because you're the only one.
Because I could tell by the first law of thermodynamics, it is.
No, sir. No, sir. No, you can't, because the first law of thermodynamics has nothing to do with the origin of the universe. Fine, you're muted again. I'm going to try and make this clear because we're having evidently some kind of audio issue, and you're not listening. If you claim that the origin of the universe is supernatural, how can you demonstrate that that is true?
Because the law of thermodynamics proves that it's true.
No, sir, it doesn't. The law of thermodynamics doesn't tell you anything about whether something is natural or supernatural. That has nothing to do with the laws of thermodynamics.
Energy cannot be created or destroyed by natural means, Matt.
John?
You could ignore that till the cows come home. It doesn't change that. Now, John, you're not listening.
You're right. And now you're done, John, because you're just going to keep saying the same shit over and over, and you're not listening. And I won't waste Seth's time on this. But go ahead,
I have a quick question for John. Not that I would, feel included, because John doesn't even know that I exist. I'm not just a piece of meat, John. I'm a human being.
I said, I just want to get your name right.
No, brother, I'm just having fun with you. Let me ask you this.
Oh, okay.
Does the God who created the universe for you have a proper name? Who is that God? Do you know?
What does this have to do with creation of the universe?
John won't answer any direct questions.
Okay, hang on. Hold on. John, is the God, the creator of the universe for you, a personal God?
What does this have to do with?
No. I have a reason for asking.
You admit.
I have a reason for asking. Is your God who created the universe a personal God with a proper name?
You're diverting. I could give you an answer.
John is a dishonest interlocutor who will not answer questions because he knows he's full of shit.
I don't know what else to do. I mean, I can't get a straight answer either.
Okay.
Goodbye, John.
Here's where I was going with that, and I'm sure the audience is probably well ahead of me. But John is making, and he's making it very poorly, the deistic argument, the first cause argument, right? The abiogenesis argument is a variation of this. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. Therefore, there.
Oh, okay. Matter. That's not true. Matter can be created and destroyed. Matter is basically mass. Anything with mass is matter. Now, the definition of what mass is the subject of another one of my video posts. So unless we need to, I'm not going to go into that, because there's a big issue about what we actually mean by the word mass. However, mass, if you refer back to the list of conserved quantities that I gave you, mass is not one of them. Mass is not a conserved quantity.
This argument is a variation of this. Matter cannot be created or destroyed. Therefore, there must have been a supernatural origin point for that first cell, etc. And then people begin to talk, and we see a lot of apologists do this. William Lane Craig and others, they make that sort of deistic argument about the creator, watchmaker, the prime mover who spun the universe into existence. But then I always find that many people like John, and I would suspect the reason he wasn't answering is that he does hold to a specific God with a proper name, whether it's associated with Christianity or wherever. And so then you've got to take this huge leap between the uncaring, really, deistic God into a personal God that is involved in the affairs of everyday people. And that's a whole different conversation. And what I was trying to demonstrate was that even if he's trying to prove some sort of a faceless, nameless, deadbeat dad out there that spun the cosmos into existence and then remained virtually undetectable, how does this have any day-to-day impact on our everyday lives? And if that deity existed and truly did have godlike powers and didn't care enough to involve himself or herself or itself with us, what do we care? How does this have how is it prescient to our lives in any specific way? Why would he care enough to call this show to argue for a deity that is completely uninterested in his life? That was the question that I had for John. Sadly, I don't think I would have ever gotten an answer.
No, and the thing is, I tried at the beginning. So first of all, I'm not saying the laws of thermodynamics necessarily do not work outside the universe. I'm also not claiming that the origin of the universe is necessarily outside of it. I was going with John's model, which is we know the laws of thermodynamics apply within the universe. We don't know for sure whether or not they apply outside of it or before. We don't have any way to confirm whether or not something is caused supernaturally. And John's a number of fallacies, one of which was John's view is that if there's not currently a natural explanation, or if a natural explanation seems to rule this out, then necessarily the explanation must be supernatural. And that's simply not true because it presumes that we have a complete understanding of the subjects, which we may not. And so it was funny to get John to agree and confirm that the laws of thermodynamics don't apply to God, that the laws of thermodynamics don't apply outside of the universe, and therefore that the laws of thermodynamics cannot be used into discussion about the origin of the universe because they would not have applied at that point, and then have him just keep going back to matter can't be created or destroyed. Matter can't be, the laws of thermodynamics, if you're going to summarize it like that, what it should say is matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed within the natural universe. And the thing is that the reason I thought this was going to be simple right off the bat is that John believes that there's a God who created this supernaturally, and that this God clearly is not bound to the laws of thermodynamics, that this God can, in fact, create matter. He's arguing for something that violates the laws of thermodynamics. So he's trying to both use the laws to say, oh, there must be something that violates these laws, and it's outside the universe, without realizing that the origin of the universe is outside the universe.
It's a double standard that many people who promote a specific deity, they say that, the laws apply to everyone except for God. He gets a get out of jail free card. He gets to kind of move and shake in ways that are nonsensical to us, therefore supernatural. But I'm still interested in why John is so kind of interested in, why he takes personally an argument about this deistic other out there. I do suspect he probably holds a deeper theistic belief. Obviously, that's an inference. I don't know for sure. But
it's a little problematic in the sense that what we're talking about here is, I don't know what the origin of the universe is. John thinks he does know, but he can't prove it. And he wanted to know at the beginning how we ruled out the supernatural. And the real issue here is, how did you rule in the supernatural? Well, we know the answer for John. John looks at the natural laws and says, oh, this dictates what can and can't happen. Therefore, if something happened and it's against natural laws, it must have been supernatural. And that is simply not a sound logical argument. But we have the best crew that you're going to find anywhere on any shows like this. There they are right there showing themselves. Look at that. All those wonderful people doing actual work so that Seth and I can just sit here and argue with people.
I have another thought. Can I throw it out?
Of course.
I'm interested in this assumption that a creator is automatically going to be benevolent. Right. I mean, I'm interested in this idea that people take with such affection the idea that there was a creator of our universe, given all the suffering, right? The unnecessary, the needless suffering that we see all around us and the bad design, et cetera. People who even make the deistic argument are quick to assume and proclaim that if there is a creator of a supernatural God that spun the universe into existence, that that God is by his or its very nature good. That's an assumption that we make. What if that
Yeah.
God was not good? What if that God was just sadistic? Thought, hey, this would be awesome. Let's take these people over here and let's pit them against each other in a brutal jihad. You know, what if we were to send, let's throw the plague upon these, let's kill 200 million and see what happens to the dynamic of the planet. That'd be awesome. I mean, what if that deity was actually the first cause deity? And yet very few people, in fact, almost no one actually considers the idea that if there was a deistic God out there, that God still has never been demonstrated to be benevolent or good. Just a thought.
Yeah, and you know, people bring this up a lot with regard to the problem of evil. You know, why are there infants dying of cancer and other degenerative illnesses? What could they have ever done? And the standard Christian apologetic is, well, it's unfortunate, but man brought sin into this world. But then you're just making excuses, because why would God allow man to bring sin into the world? Why would God construct it in such a way that if I bring sin into the world, it causes babies to suffer immensely, while I might not be suffering at all? I might be, you know, a billionaire that just eats and has sex all the time and never a dull moment and listens to the best music. If I'm the one that's contributing to sin in the world, why is somebody else suffering for it? That seems to be an incredibly broken system.
Well, I also, beyond the fallen world apologetic, I hear a lot of free will, and they throw this out as if it makes any sense at all.
Right.
And you and I come from the position that a God who really was interested in free will would give us the best information with which to make our choices. A revelation of God in an incontrovertible form does not in any way negate our free choice. It actually gives us better information by which to make that choice. And so this idea that, well, the reason God won't or can't manifest himself or won't do miracles in the 21st century or can't do them the way he did back in, you know, Old Testament times, or the reason blah, 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 is because of free will. And I think to myself, I think my choice as to whether or not to hold to a specific deity and to be allegiant to that deity, well, that choice is better made with better information. And so I think that actually places a greater burden on whatever God that is to be there and to give me the info I need. So
that gives us an opportunity here to take a call from Lynn in Pennsylvania, who thinks that God should just be love. And welcome to the show, Lynn. I'm wondering, and I mean, do you believe in this God? How is it that we're in any position to say what God should be?
Exactly, and that's why we are the position of God.
I'm sorry, Lynn. I asked a question. And you said exactly, and then went on to say that. So, is your position that is there a God, and what God is that?
I believe that love is the religion, and love is within us. It is up to us to expand upon that. And that is what needs to continuously happen in this world in order for us to grow. So if we can't find the love within us, we're not going to find it anywhere else.
I like the sentiment. What I'm curious about, do you feel that we are constituting a kind of God by the manifestation of love, or that God is, or love is an expression of a God? Do you believe in a supernatural God? I think is probably the short version of the question.
Okay, if you would explain what supernatural means to you.
Not abiding by any of the natural laws, a God with godlike powers.
I mean, what are the properties of the God that you're advocating for? Is it just one property? Is it just love?
It's a rainbow of properties.
Okay. Then what are the properties? Because love is love. God is not love. Love is love. So what are the other properties of this God you're advocating for?
Feelings, showing, having appreciation and gratitude for those around you versus...
No. None of these are properties. These are things people do.
I'm not sure whether this is going to go anywhere. I think that Lynn is deliberately, I suspect, being vague here, because Matt already asked her, and Seth has after Matt, about her God, and she must realize what they mean. And they're trying to at least establish what our kind of, if you like, worldview is when it comes to the concept of religion and a God. And she's avoiding that. And to say that the manifestation of her God is basically our emotions is not going to go very far. And I'm not really sure whether that's helpful in these kinds of discussion. The fact that she asked Seth to define what he meant by a God, and then he did, and then she just basically ignored it. It does not fill me with confidence here that Lynn is being open, honest, and genuine. But it'll be interesting to see where she wants to go with this. I think we'll see. No?
Versus,
No. None of these are properties. These are things people do. What are the properties of this
as
God?
far as which, like, I don't understand properties. I don't understand.
Clearly.
What type of properties are you looking for?
Well, Lynn, if I can jump in, Lynn, if I express love and if I do all the things that you had just mentioned without a God belief, how does that work?
It is kindness.
Another bland statement that doesn't mean...
I try to demonstrate kindness in my life, but I don't hold to a supernatural God. So where does my kindness come from your perspective?
From within, from sitting by yourself and evaluating choices that have been made and decisions that have been followed through with.
Okay, so it's an innate human expression, a feeling and expression that is uniquely personal to the individual, no God required. Am I tracking?
Correct, absolutely.
Then I don't know what this has to do with the atheist experience or any discussions about God, because you're not a theist and you're not talking about a God. You just are a fan of love.
I am a fan of people, and I'm a fan of continuing forward together.
You understand that the purpose of this show is to address people's beliefs about gods, and you don't believe in a God, despite the fact that you labeled yourself a theist.
But we're removing the fact that it's people, and we're just looking at the beliefs. Everybody's beliefs are different.
No. So
and
we're talking about whether or not people have a justified reason for particular beliefs. At no point have Seth or I or anybody in the show objected to love or encouraging more love. So why would you just call in to advocate for love and claim that love is God or that you're a theist when you're not?
Because I'm divinely driven.
What does that mean, divinely driven? What is driving you? What is divine?
It's innate. It's innate. Everything that I see in the world around.
Lynn, I'd love for you to actually answer the question that was asked. What is divine?
Divine is what drives humans to show love.
Yeah, this is just one big tautology in favor of love. And I got no problem with love. I just don't think we should spend any more time on the show about this particular thing. If you thought love was a God, if you thought there was a mind behind it, if you were advocating for some particular belief that leads to something we could discuss, that's fine. But if all you're going to do is come in and say, I love love, congratulations.
Okay, no, I understand where you're coming from. Please forgive me. I need directions. I need a little oomph because this world is brutal.
What?
So please forgive me. Bear with me here while I collect my words, if you will, please.
Well, I mean, when I ask you what's divine, you have a non-standard definition for divine. You didn't seem to know what was meant by supernatural. You're not advocating for a God that is
wrong.
Hang on, Lynn.
Yes.
You're not.
Yes.
Are you advocating for a God that is a thinking agent?
I'm advocating for me, which is the God within.
We're done now, Lynn. Thank you. I apologize, but I don't need people calling in to advocate for them.
It's an odd conversation. It's reminiscent of that the old Star Trek: The Motion Picture, where she's like, who is V'ger? V'ger is that which seeks the creator. Who's the creator? That is who is being sought by V'ger, right? I mean, whenever you'd throw something out, I was just like, what was the answer to the question?
It's all love. What is divine? Divine is that which which encourages love.
And what is divine? That which is innate.
And that's true. As I said, Lynn was, I think, deliberately avoiding giving anything that could be a hook into a discussion that is appropriate for the show. However, I cannot deny the fact that the concept of, I actually, believe it or not, want the word love to be defined as an emotion or as a way of expressing yourself. But the idea that we should be looking after each other better is clearly very important. We should be taking care of each other. We should not be doing things with a deliberate intent in trying to be unkind or unpleasant to other people. I'm going to make a small point here, which is slightly tangential, but not hugely. We are at the moment in a world which seems to be driven, at least by a relative minority, but powerful minority, into what's known as a cancel culture, where any person that might make a tweet or a post or a comment in the media that in some way somebody finds offensive, and there's almost nothing you can say that somebody won't find offensive, it can then be brought up and basically that person will be attacked with it. I feel particularly sorry for young people at the moment, for teenagers, because in your teens, you're allowed to make mistakes. You're allowed to try things and get it wrong because you're not very good as a teenager in dealing with some of the tricky bits to do with people because you haven't had lots of experience of it. And I think that when you make a mistake, it's so easy with social networking now to post something on Twitter that you think afterwards, okay, maybe that was a little bit harsh, or maybe the words weren't quite the best words to use. Someone will misunderstand or misinterpret or deliberately misinterpret what I've said. Well, if in the future, let's say in 10, 15, 20, 30 years time, a teenager decides, okay, actually, I'd kind of like to go into local government. I'd like to be an MP, that kind of thing. And of course, MPs are in 20 or 30 years time going to be still around. This is going to happen. And the media then look back at all your tweets and find, oh, hang on, 20 years ago, you made this tweet that actually is not very nice. We're now going to basically attack you over it. The idea that young people, as they learn and make mistakes, can have those mistakes haunt them for the rest of their life is simply unacceptable. If we make mistakes, if we speak inappropriately, it should be pointed out to us so that we can learn from our mistakes, so that we can review our ideas and maybe change them or argue our case. Freedom of speech is really important, but what we shouldn't do is be crucified over them. We shouldn't be allowed to not make a mistake. And we should definitely not be doing that to our young people who have very, very little experience of the world compared with adults. They need the freedom to make mistakes and to not be crucified for them. Anyway, it's a small issue for me, but one that is clearly very important. I'm going to move on because I'm on a soapbox here, and that's not the point of this.
Encourages love.
And what is divine? That which is innate. What? There's some. I'm a little up to my eyeballs in nonsensical arguments anyway. But having heard that, I still don't know what I've heard. 6-7 minutes of love exists and it's divine because it's innate and it's about the self. It sounds like rubbish. It sounds very new agey to me. I don't know.
I'm gonna take this one next. It may also be unusual. I'm trying to hold off on one where Somebody wants to talk about slavery again. We're going to hold off on that. But Jackson in Virginia has, I guess, an issue with the Bible. So welcome, Jackson. You're on with Seth and Matt.
Hey, it's nice to be on here. I'm actually really excited and kind of nervous a little bit, but I used to be a Christian, and then I actually sat down and thought about what the Bible defines as sin, and the Bible ends up contradicting itself. So I'm just going to explain that right now. So a lot of theists or Christians, they might claim if you choose to not believe or that the Bible is true, you're going to go to hell, and the reason you're going to go to hell is because that's a sin, and you also have other sins that send you to hell. But if you really look into the Bible and you look for the definition of sin, it's described as doing something that you know God would not approve of, but do it anyway. You know, that's a sin. So if an atheist, let's say, go with the theist's reason, chooses to not believe that the Bible is true, well, that would also lead them to not know that the Bible has God in it. And if they don't know that the Bible is God, then they don't know that all the commands in the Bible are from God. And if they don't know all the commands in the Bible are not from God, then they can't sin because they're not going against God.
No, that's not.
Rest.
No, sorry. So thank you. No. You're putting me in the position of having to defend Christianity from bad arguments. That what you're talking about is not actually Christian doctrine and not necessarily biblical. Sin is committing an act that transgresses against God, and ignorance of the law is no excuse. Mm-hmm. But in Romans, it points out that God has written his law on all men's hearts. So the argument from Christianity is that we, in fact, know that there is a God. We know what this God wants from us, and it's not a matter of choosing to not believe. We are disobedient. That's what sin is.
Can I? I'm not actually like supporting Christianity. I just had.
I know. You're making bad arguments against it, which forces me to correct it.
Okay, so what I'm trying to get at is like, I don't think God would like punish somebody.
Thanks for calling, Jackson. Been a pleasure.
I really hate. So this is something that has come up, and I don't know. Granted, you and I operate slightly differently because I do more debates. I am more likely, between the shows and the debates, I'm more likely to be in contentious conversations, which occasionally makes me short-fused, and occasionally it means that I'm going to ask the questions that they're just going to avoid answering. But I'm finding that I spend as much or more of my time correcting other atheists on their incredibly awful understanding of the Bible and Christianity and all of this. And I know some of it's because, they weren't really involved with it, and people in the pews don't necessarily know what's going on, or maybe some of them were Catholic or Protestant, or they came from some tiny religion. But it's like, I don't want there to be bad arguments against Christianity, because that means that when people find their way out of it, it's like when Sam Harris, he wrote a book where he said the Bible says pi equals 3. And by the way, this caller, Jackson, the call screener thing, which he never got to, was he said the Bible argues that 1 equals -1. And I was waiting for him to get there because that's a load of shit. At no point is there anything in the Bible that says 1 equals -1. And I'm not interested in little word games. But I tell you what, there's a call I want to take now from Barbados. No Rock in Barbados wants to talk about God and morality. Welcome to the show. How are you?
Hey, Matt and Seth. How are you guys doing?
Hey, doing well. It says here you want to talk about what God says with regard to morality. How can Seth and I know what God says about morality? I mean, we can't just take your word for it.
No. Let me start here first. Let me put what I believe out there. I believe that in the Christian God, I believe that Jesus was the manifestation of God in the flesh, and the laws that he wrote for man to live by. I just put in that with this, so you will know what.
Yeah, I'm concerned though, Narak, because I'm not aware that Jesus wrote anything. How do you know that Jesus wrote something?
Because he said that he was before Abraham. No,
but that's not. No.
Context of the Bible.
No, Narak. I asked how you knew that Jesus
Yeah.
wrote anything. You said that Jesus wrote the laws, and now I'm asking, how do you know that Jesus?
I'm getting there.
No. I'm asking how do you know that Jesus wrote something? That's it.
How I know that he had a pen in his hand writing on a piece of paper? That's what you mean?
That's what it means to write something.
If we're speaking about scripture, if you read 1 Peter 1:11, it says it was the Spirit of Christ testifying of his suffering in the prophets. So when the prophets wrote, as it said in 1 Timothy 1:16, that everything was inspired by God, he was basically saying, no, I'm just saying that is what I believe. That is what I believe that Christ.
And I know what you believe. Narak, stop talking. I know what you believe. I'm asking why. Can you tell me why you believe Jesus wrote something?
Oh, because he said that.
How do you know that he said it? You don't get to. I got a couple more calls here. Paulo in DC has a view on God's existence, which I think we can kind of handle pretty quickly. Welcome, Paulo. You're on with Seth and Matt. How can we help?
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, how are you?
Exhausted. How are you?
Yes. I've been listening to the show. Now I have lots of extra questions in my mind, but basically what I wanted to bring up, I was born and raised as Catholic, but I went exploring different areas of religion. But anyway, I think it would be very important. Oh, first of all, I want to say that I just found the Atheist Experience just recently. I think it is an amazing enterprise because you really talk about God. I mean, you really, in one way, we are all really searching for God just by asking for a proof of God's existence. Anyway, so my compliments to your work.
Thank you.
What I want to bring up is that going back to the beginning, right, the creation of the universe, it is interesting, not just as a mental exercise, but also really as a tool to try to figure out if God really exists or not. Let's assume that God exists and that he created the universe. Then the question is, why did he do it? Why?
No. See, Paulo, I can't begin with, let's assume God created the universe and then ask why he did it. You don't just get to assume the very thing we're addressing here. And so what reason do we have to think there's a God?
Well, I think just the fact that we are spending like 3 hours every week arguing about the existence of God, I mean, we must assume something. Otherwise, what is the point of arguing about the existence of God if we just assume that God does not exist?
That's a frankly ridiculous argument. The idea that because we discuss a fallacy, there must be something in that fallacy that makes it maybe not a fallacy. That's just an unbelievably short-sighted argument. There are lots and lots and lots of things that we don't know yet. And on the issue of religion versus non-religion, when our scientific knowledge is not able to yet explain certain things, religious thinking tends to jump in there. It's God is the standard answer that is useless. But that seems to be what happened. And then, of course, you end up with a discussion about whether we can explain this or we can't explain this. And of course, the creation of the universe is one of the big ones here. And the fact that a bunch of people who, for different reasons, may have adopted a position of believing in a God, and there are lots of potentially positive and negative reasons for doing that, including the manipulation of people and the generation of money for them. There are lots of reasons. Then I think we would then have an argument. But that doesn't mean that because I think you're wrong, completely wrong, and that thing you're thinking of is made up and there's no evidence for it, that actually no, there must be, because I'm thinking it and we're discussing it. That's just a really, really, really weak argument that frankly doesn't go anywhere.
Of arguing about the existence of God if we just assume that God does not exist. What's the point?
No, Paolo, the point of having these discussions is because there are a bunch of people who believe and there are a bunch of people who don't believe. And the people who believe have a burden of proof. And so we'd like to get them to meet that. Both Seth and I used to believe, and now we don't, because we realized that we did not have a good reason to believe.
I understand, yeah.
So what reason should we believe?
Well, in my first statement, I just say that I found the existence of God as self-evident, just because.
Okay, well, that's just not true. That's just not true, because, I mean, it seems evident to you, but it's not evident to us. So the fact that something's evident to you, how do you know that what you think is self-evident is actually true?
No, I'm not saying that it is a proof that can be proved to somebody who does not believe in God.
So that's not what I asked.
Okay, what did you ask? Please repeat.
So
sounds very much
if
like
something appears to be self-evident to you, how can you tell whether or not it's actually true? Is it possible, for example, let me answer this question differently. Is it possible that you could think something was self-evidently true, but you could be wrong?
Yes, it is possible.
Okay, then the next question is, do you care whether or not something is true?
Yes, I care very much to find out.
So if God is, if you think that God is self-evident, then how can you tell whether or not you're correct?
I cannot at this time.
If you can't tell, then why would you believe? If you say you care about whether or not it's true, how can you believe something if there's no way to verify it?
Well, I can choose to believe, or I can just choose.
Paolo's missing the point here. He's walked into an issue here and he just doesn't see it. The argument that I have a belief, and then the question, how do you know it's true? Does truth matter to you? Yes, truth matters a lot. So how can you determine that it's true? And I can't. I just believe, I have faith. Those two things don't marry well together.
Well, I can choose to believe, or I can just choose not to believe.
It's not just to choose to believe. No, Paolo. No. First of all, belief is not a choice. But what we just addressed was, you said you care whether or not your belief is true, but you have no way of testing it. How many other things do you believe that you cannot verify?
Well, I have no way of testing it, but that does not stop me for keep trying to find out if
Sure.
God really exists.
Paolo, I am in no way discouraging you. I am in no way discouraging you from trying to find out if one exists. You can try to find out if a God exists for the rest of your life, but the time to believe it is after you've found out, not just while you're trying to find out. For example, if we were trying to find out if there was a connection between smoking cigarettes and cancer, the time to believe that there's a connection is when we actually find the evidence for that, and not a moment before. As it turns out, there is a connection between smoking cigarettes and cancer. We know that from the evidence. If you're going to say that you believe that there's a God, that is the same as saying you believe that smoking causes cancer or contributes to cancer, and you're doing it while saying, I don't have the evidence, I'm still looking for it. So now you're saying you believe something, even though you have not yet reached the point where you have sufficient evidence to believe it.
I understand. Can I change my statement then?
Sure.
What I'm saying is that I'm not sure if I believe in the existence of God. Is that okay?
So you don't know whether or not you believe in a God. If you Don't you think that if you did believe in a God, you would know it?
Well, let's just say that I'm not sure that God exists, and there is no way for me to prove it.
I'm not asking.
I'll take that. Look,
I'm not asking about
though.
sure. That's fine. I'm just saying when you say you're not sure if you believe or not, I would argue that if you believed in a God, you'd kind of know it. But yeah, I'm fine with you saying you don't know whether God exists or not.
If
so
I
now
can jump in,
Okay.
there's one other thing that I heard at the beginning of your call, and I want to make sure that I'm tracking. I sense from you, and I hear a variation of this, for someone who doesn't believe in God, you sure talk about him an awful lot, meaning that it's kind of a self-conscious response. Maybe we do secretly believe. I hear from you that, hey, if there isn't a God out there, why is humankind so obsessed with these conversations relating to the God questions? Did I hear that right?
Yeah.
In other words, you think our interest in the God questions kind of leans into this innate desire of human beings to believe in a higher power?
Well, it is possible, but you are right, actually. We are all obsessed with the idea of God.
I don't think that's correct. But let me clarify what I'm trying to say. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but what I'm hearing is if humankind has throughout our history been interested in the questions, the bigger questions, where did we come from? How did life begin? What is our purpose? That type of thing. These sort of existential questions, which we so often hear throughout the human condition. You think that that kind of searching for answers leans into the search for God. Is that accurate? Do I have that right?
I think so, yeah.
Okay. So you feel like because we are so interested in questions about where did we come from, how did the universe begin, et cetera, where do our morals come from, all of these types of things, our interest in that seems to indicate that there must be a God. Otherwise, why would we be so obsessed? Is that right?
No. That is not a proof. It's not a proof of the existence of God. It's just a proof that we are obsessed with this idea of God. Now,
no. I think we are. If I may, I think we are, as part of the human condition. We're obsessed. May not be the word. We're interested, or at least most of us are, in answers. And as Hitch used to say, back in the infancy of our species, our first answers were almost always our worst. People didn't understand germ theory. We didn't understand the cosmos. We didn't know what stars were. We didn't know what caused disease and epilepsy and natural disasters. And so people in their ignorance would reach up and look up to the skies, and they would call down their deities, and they would pray and chant. And these were all human expressions in a search for greater meaning or causes for something. But the more we've come to know about the natural world, the less and less and less we've needed those superstitious answers, those sort of primitive answers rooted in human ignorance. And I don't think that our quest for knowing more tomorrow than we knew today, that having discussions about whether or not someone can prove a God, etc., none of that validates the existence of a God. It simply means we are engaged in the arena of ideas to try to determine what is true, what is real, what is false, what is superstition. Fair enough?
Yeah.
We're interested in finding answers wherever they may be. Some people like to scribble something in a blank, and others, like Matt and me, and hopefully you, are saying, you're probably going to have to demonstrate that before I fill in that blank. Otherwise, the answer is, I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. But,
and if we're all fine with I don't know, I think I kind of got to pause it here, Paolo, because we're almost out of time, and there's one more call that I promised we would get to. But
Probably my fault.
No, it's not. It's fine.
On, brother. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. I would love for you to call back and talk about this more, Paolo, because I think if we're all in the same boat of saying, hey, I don't know, that should be fine. But my obsession with God, if you want to call it that, has to do with the fact that I was a believer, that I found out I didn't have good reason, and then I find myself in a world full of people who believe. And for 16 years, I've been here asking what's the good reason to believe, and nobody seems to have a good reason. And it puzzles me that people are so eager and willing to believe when they don't really have a good reason. But I got to move on to another caller, Paula. I'd love for you to call us back and talk another time.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
I think his journey is really, I love the fact that his journey hopefully is about questions. God, keep asking questions. Yeah. Keep tapping on the glass, keep kicking the tires, keep being curious. I think there's a lot of utility in that.
There is, and I love the questioning. But for the final call for today, we have Drew in California, who says that I'm saying things about Christianity that aren't true. So my apologies if I dominate this call. But Drew, welcome to the show. What did I get wrong?
Okay, I have no idea where this conversation is going to go, but I do not believe it will go well.
Hi, how you guys doing today?
Well, I'm pretty good.
Good. Hey, okay, so the main reason I called was I do believe, and as I've listened to a lot of videos and watched a lot of shows, that there has been, not necessarily just from Matt, but from the other hosts have said things about Christianity that are not true. I'm
aware of that. We're really short on time. Can you get to the thing that I said that wasn't true?
Okay. Well, let's do this then. How much time do we have?
About 1 minute.
Okay. Let's go to 1 Timothy chapter 1, verse 9 and 10. Which does
I don't need to go to 1 Timothy, because 1 Timothy is a note from Paul that isn't about slavery in general. It is about a slave. It is asking for the releasing. Drew, it is asking for the Drew, stop while I'm talking, or nobody's going to fucking hear you. 1 Timothy.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Is about Paul asking for the release of a slave. It has nothing to do with opposing slavery, and it's Paul, not God. That doesn't undermine the fact that God supposedly sanctioned slavery in Exodus 21 and Leviticus 25 and in Deuteronomy.
Let's go to Exodus 21, verse 16. Exodus 21:16. Read that.
Exodus 21:16.
I know you have a Bible in front of you. Go ahead and read that.
I have lots of them.
Exodus 21:16.
Sure. Anyone who kidnaps someone is to be put to death. That's about kidnapping. That is not about slavery. You're skipping. Drew, stop. You don't get to cherry pick verses. If you read a couple verses down there, it talks about. So first of all, the first part of Exodus 21 is about Hebrew servants, who you can buy, how to go about buying them, how to make them your slaves forever. You don't just get to skip down to say anyone who steals another person, because now you're talking about someone potentially stealing someone else's slave. The Bible specifically says that you can beat your slaves because they are your property. It doesn't just say this in Exodus 21. It also says it in Luke 12. In the parable about how slaves should be beaten and servants should be beaten. This is what the Bible says. It says you shall own these. They are your property. They are your money in the King James, and that you can pass them on to your children. You don't just get to point to a verse that says don't steal men, because stealing men isn't slavery.
Yes,
where is the verse? Where is the verse that says thou shalt not own another person as property?
Listen, it says, he who kidnaps a man to
Drew, are you going to answer my question or not? Drew, are you going to answer my question? I can point to multiple Bible. Drew, shut up and listen. I can point to multiple Bible verses that say it is okay to own another person's property. Can you point to a Bible verse that says it is not okay to own another person's property?
Yeah, I can give you 20 of them right now.
Give me one. Give me one fucking verse that says it's not okay to own people as property. I bet you cannot.
Okay,
you are such a dishonest interlocutor. How dare you? Fuck off, Drew.
I just want to hear. I want to hear the one verse.
He said, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." That's the verse he went to. Of his 20 fucking verses that he could supposedly produce, where the Bible says, "Don't own another human being," he goes to "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you." Drew, you are a dishonest arguer, and you're not welcome back on this show. How dare you make me wait through the whole show for you to tell me how I'm wrong and then come up with absolute bullshit like that?
The Bible can be whatever you want it to be. If you want to make it a bigotry book, you can. If you want to make it a love book, you can. If you want to make it a discriminatory book, you can do that. If you want to make it an acceptance book, you can do that. If I can throw in that slug for Dr. Josh Bowen's book, the Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament, he has a whole chapter that gets into debt slaves and chattel slaves and how it's not indentured servanthood in these certain contexts, and how it was expected that slaves be owned and beaten to keep them in line and to keep them submissive and doing what they are commanded to do. And so don't let anybody throw out the canard about indentured servanthood. And it was actually a congenial, wonderful relationship between these chattel slaves and their masters. It absolutely was not anything other than owning someone else, owning another human being. And I do recommend that chapter. I think he's got an actual whole book about it, slavery in the Old Testament, which I recommend to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So Josh's book, the latest one, which I had him on the show about.
Oh, you got it. Okay.
The Atheist Handbook to the Old Testament. And prior to this, he wrote a book on does the Old Testament, does the Bible sanction slavery? And then he and I did a debate on it as well. So first of all, thank you a ton for joining us here this week. My apologies for, dominating a call or two, because every time you spoke, the show got better. And
whatever.
And no. Every time you spoke, the show got better, and that didn't go unnoticed by me or anybody else. And because of that, if we got a graphic we can put up here to point some people to Seth, because there was a caller who didn't know who the hell Seth was, and that is an embarrassing situation there. You check out thethinkingatheist.com, where you can also find Seth's books, including Deconverted, Sacred Cows, and Confessions of a Former Fox News Christian. There's a lot there, and there's a ton of content on the YouTube channel and on the podcast as well. Seth and I have been friends for years. I'm always thrilled to get him on the show. I'm reluctant to ask him to come on too often, although I'd love to hang out with him every week if I could.
That's a lot of fun for me, and it's always nice to get the invite. And yeah, I'd love to do it again someday. So have your people call my people.
You bet. Okay. Now go play some tennis. And for all of you sitting...
Okay, I'm going to pause there and basically say that we'll round this up now. The one thing I would like to emphasize is the fact that at the moment we are still struggling in the world with various variants to COVID, and we must not take these things lightly. I'm not suggesting we have, but we must not fall into that thing that human beings are very easy to fall into, which is complacency. You need to stay safe. You need to try to socially distance. It is a good thing. It's a good sign of respect you have for other people to wear a mask and get vaccinated when you can get vaccinated, and obviously the second vaccination, or as I found out from a friend of mine in Turkey, the third vaccination at the right medically appropriate time, of course. And these are all important things to do. But stay safe, look after yourself, eat, drink, sleep well, particularly sleep. That's really, really important. And try and make a positive difference to someone else's life. Because if you can do that, then whatever else you're doing, you're probably on a reasonable path. So I'm going to finish there. Again, as I said at the beginning, if you particularly like this content, or you think that it's useful, then please, the big four, as it were. I don't know whether they're really called the big four, but I'm calling them the big four. Like, share, subscribe, and click that bell. Take care, and I'll see you next time.